I remember the exact weight of the pen in my hand. It was a Sunday. The kind of Sunday that doesn't know it is about to become the worst day of your life. Quiet, gray, the sort of morning where the light comes in flat and indifferent through windows that used to feel like home. I was sitting at the dining table we had picked out together 2 years ago from a store in Gangnam, the one I had argued about for 20 minutes because the wood grain was slightly uneven on one side and Do-hyun had laughed at me and said I was the only Omega in Seoul who could find a flaw in a perfect table. He wasn't laughing now. He was standing across the room with his back to me, looking out at the city below, hands in the pockets of his trousers. Dressed like he was going somewhere important. Dressed like this was a meeting. Like I was a meeting. Kwon Do-hyun, 29 years old, heir to the Kwon Group, the most quietly powerful alpha I had ever had the catastrophic misfortune of falling completely in love with, standing in our apartment like a stranger who had already decided to leave and was simply waiting for the paperwork to confirm it. The papers were in front of me. Divorce papers. Precise. Already signed on his line in that sharp controlled handwriting I used to watch move across documents and think, foolishly, beautifully, disastrously, that he was the most capable man I had ever seen. Jae-woo, he said without turning around. It's better this way. I looked at the papers. My name was at the bottom, waiting. Just my name. Just my signature. Just the last thing standing between the life I had built around this man and the nothing that came after. Better. He had said better. As if leaving was a kindness. As if 3 years of waking up beside someone, of learning every version of their silence, of building something real and quiet and yours inside the loud, dangerous world of the Kwon family, as if all of that could be neatly folded into the word better and handed back without explanation. I had known something was wrong for weeks. The distance, the late nights that stopped feeling like work and started feeling like avoidance. The way he looked at me sometimes across a room. Not the way he used to, that specific focused look that made me feel like the only fixed point in a moving world, but the way you look at something you have already decided to put down. Carefully. Without cruelty. But putting it down regardless. I had asked him twice. He had said work. He had said the Kwon Group was restructuring, that his father was pressuring him, that there were complications I wouldn't understand. I had let him say it. I was good at letting Do-hyun say things I knew weren't the whole truth because I trusted that eventually he would find his way to the real thing. He found his way to divorce papers instead. Your father, I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. This is about what your father wants. He said nothing, which was its own answer. Kwon Do-hyun's father, Kwon Si-jin, a man I had met exactly 7 times in 3 years, each time feeling the specific chill of being assessed and found insufficient, had never approved of me. I was not from a family with the right name. I was an Omega who worked, who had opinions, who did not fold quietly into the shape the Kwon family needed their son's mate to occupy. I was, in Kwon Si-jin's precise and terrible words at the one family dinner I was invited to and never invited to again, a distraction from Do-hyun's future. I had told Do-hyun that night what his father said. He had held my face in his hands and told me his father was wrong. He had said it like he meant it. He had looked like he meant it. That was 8 months ago. Now he was standing at the window and the papers were on the table and I was holding a pen and trying to remember how to breathe around the things sitting on my chest. I thought about telling him. Right then. I had known for 6 days. 6 days of a secret sitting in my body like something both terrifying and extraordinary, 6 days of turning it over in my hands in private, trying to find the right moment, the right words. 6 days of waiting for the distance between us to close enough that I could say it without it feeling like a weapon or a plea. There was no right moment now. There was only this table and these papers and his back turned to me and the city spread out behind him gray and indifferent. I looked at the papers. I thought about what it would mean to say it. I thought about his father. I thought about a man who could stand at a window and call leaving better without once turning to look at the person he was leaving. I thought about what kind of world I was about to bring something small and real and entirely mine into. And I picked up the pen. And I signed my name. Seo Jae-woo. 26 years old. Omega. Signing away 3 years like they were something that could be neatly concluded. Do-hyun turned when he heard the pen set down. He looked at the papers. Then he looked at me. And for just a second, one single second, something crossed his face that was not the controlled, decided expression of a man completing a transaction. Something that looked almost like pain. Almost like he was about to say something that was not "it's better this way." I stood up before he could find it. "I hope it's everything your father wanted," I said. And I walked out of that apartment. Out of that life. Out of 3 years. I walked out carrying the one thing I had not signed away. The one thing he didn't know existed yet. 4 years is a long time to become someone else. I didn't plan it that way. I didn't sit in the small apartment in Mapogu that first night, the one I found in 3 hours because I needed walls around me before I fell apart, and tell myself I was going to rebuild from the ground up. I didn't make a plan. I was 26 years old, newly divorced, 8 weeks pregnant, with a signed settlement check from the Kwan family lawyers that arrived so quickly it was almost insulting, and a body that had not yet decided whether it was going to hold together or not. What I did was survive the first night. Then the first week. Then the first month, which was the hardest because month 1 is when the morning sickness arrived with the specific cruelty of something that doesn't care that you are heartbroken and alone and trying to figure out how to be a person without the architecture you built your personhood around. My best friend Hazel found out on day 3. She showed up at my door with 3 bags of groceries, a heating pad, and an expression that said she had exactly one question and was going to ask it only once. "Did he know?" she said. "No," I said. She looked at me for a long time. Then she put the groceries away and sat beside me on the floor and didn't say anything else about it. That was why Hazel was the only person in my life I trusted completely. She knew when a question only needed to be asked once. I decided not to tell Do-hyun. I made that decision slowly, over the course of 6 weeks, turning it over every day, setting it down, picking it back up. I was not trying to punish him. I told myself that clearly and repeatedly so I could believe it. This was not revenge. This was survival. A man who could stand at a window and say it's better this way while his Omega sat at the table with papers that ended everything. That man, I had decided, was not ready to be a father. Or perhaps more honestly, I was not ready to be connected to that man for the rest of my life through something as permanent and real as a child. His father would have found a way to take that too. So I kept it. I kept it the way you keep something precious when you are moving through dangerous territory, close, quiet, known only to the people who would protect it. My son was born on a Tuesday in March. Park Do-hyun. I gave him my family name, Park, and the first syllable of a name I could not bring myself to either use or entirely let go. He came into the world at 3:47 a.m. with Hazel holding my hand and a fierceness in his cry that made the nurse laugh and say this one is going to be trouble. He had Do-hyun's eyes. I had prepared myself for that possibility and it had not helped at all. Do-hyun grew. I grew with him. I finished the interior design certification I had put down when I moved into the Kwan apartment and somehow never picked back up. I built a client list from nothing. First small apartments, then offices, then through one referral and then another a penthouse renovation that got photographed for a design magazine and changed everything overnight. Park Jae-woo Interiors. 7 employees. A studio in Yongsan. A name that people in Seoul now said with the particular respect reserved for someone who built something real. I was 30 years old and I had built a life from a signed piece of paper and a secret. The secret was now 3 years old and obsessed with dinosaurs and had his father's jaw and my stubbornness and absolutely no idea that the man whose eyes he had inherited was one of the most powerful alphas in Seoul. I had kept it all perfectly, quietly contained. Until the morning my assistant Nayoung put a folder on my desk, a new client brief, and said, "Big one. Kwan Group. Full headquarters redesign. They specifically requested you." I looked at the folder. I looked at the name on the brief. And the very careful, very solid, very deliberately constructed world I had been living in for 4 years shifted underneath me like ground that was never as stable as I thought. Kwan Do-hyun. Project lead. Direct contact. He was back. I almost didn't take the meeting. I sat with that folder for 2 days. I opened it 4 times and closed it 4 times. I made a list, an actual written list, because I was the kind of person who made lists when the alternative was letting feelings make decisions, of every reason to decline the project. It was a long list. At the top of it, underlined twice, "Your 3-year-old son has his eyes and he does not know it." Hazel, when I told her, put her coffee down with the slow, careful precision of someone trying not to throw it. "Jae-woo. I know. He requested you specifically." I know. That is not a coincidence. I know, Hazel. So what are you going to do? I picked up the folder. I thought about Park Jae-woo Interiors, 7 employees, the studio in Yongsan, the name I had built from nothing. I thought about what it meant to run from this and what message that sent, to myself, to my work, to the person I had spent 4 years becoming. I thought about Do-hyun at home with his grandmother asking questions about dinosaurs with the focused intensity of someone who has inherited an alpha's attention span and an omega's curiosity. I took the meeting. The Kwon Group headquarters was everything I expected: cold, precise, a building that had been designed to communicate power to anyone who walked into it. I had been here once before, 3 years into my marriage, for a function I had attended as Do-hyun's wife and spent the entire evening being looked through by people who saw the name Kwon and then looked at me and found the math unsatisfactory. I wore the charcoal blazer. The good one. I had my portfolio. I had Naeung beside me with the presentation materials and the expression of someone who did not know she was walking into the most significant room of my last 4 years. He was already in the conference room when we arrived. Kwon Do-hyun, 33 years old now. 4 years older than the man who had stood at a window and called leaving better. He was standing at the head of the table looking at something on his phone, and he looked up when the door opened, and for one single suspended second the room did something physics should not have allowed. It contracted, the air pressure shifted, everything that had happened in 4 years arrived in my chest all at once like something that had been traveling a long distance and had just reached its destination. He had changed. Not in the obvious ways. Still tall, still that specific unhurried stillness, still the jaw and the dark eyes that I had been looking at in miniature on my son's face for 3 years. But something underneath had changed. Something in the way he held himself. The armor he used to wear so naturally it looked like skin. It was still there, but it sat differently. Heavier. Like something that had been maintained at great effort for a long time. He looked at me like he had been waiting for exactly this and was still not prepared for it. Seo Jae-woo, he said. Mr. Kwon, I said. Because I was here as a professional and I would die before I let this room see anything else from me. The meeting lasted an hour. I was good, I was better than good, I was the best version of the person I had built, precise and confident and completely in command of every detail of the proposal I had prepared. Naeung told me afterward that I was terrifying in there, which was the best compliment she had ever given me. Do-hyun watched me the entire hour. Not the way his father had watched me, assessing, measuring for inadequacy. The way he used to watch me across rooms before everything went wrong. That fixed, specific, you are the only point I'm tracking attention that I had spent 4 years trying to forget the feeling of. After Naeung stepped out to take a call, the room went quiet. Just the two of us and 4 years of distance and the folder on the table between us. You look well, he said. I am well, I said. I heard about the Hanam project. The magazine feature. People talk. I kept the issue, he said quietly. Something moved in my chest. I did not let it reach my face. Was there anything else about the proposal you needed to discuss? He was quiet for a moment. Then, my father is gone, Jae-woo. 6 months ago. The Kwon Group is mine now. I looked at him. I thought about a man at a window. I thought about a signed piece of paper. I thought about a 3-year-old with dark eyes asking me last week why he didn't have a daddy and me finding an answer that was both true and survivable. I'm sorry for your loss, I said. And I meant it. Even now. Even after everything. I meant it. I need to tell you something, he said. His voice had dropped into the register it used to use when he was saying something he had been carrying for a long time. Something I should have said 4 years ago. My phone buzzed on the table. I looked down at the screen. It was Hazel. 1 message. 3 words that turned my blood cold. Do-hyun is here. I was on my feet before I finished reading it. Jae-woo. Excuse me, I said. 1 moment. I walked out of the conference room with the measured steps of someone who was absolutely not panicking, closed the door behind me with a soft controlled click, and then walked very quickly to the end of the corridor where Haesol was standing with Do-hyun on her hip, my son looking around the Kwon Group headquarters with the wide, curious eyes of a child who finds everything interesting and the expression of someone who is about to start asking questions I cannot answer in this building. His daycare called. Hae-sol whispered, the specific whisper of someone trying to explain a disaster quietly and rapidly. Fever. I couldn't reach your mother. I didn't know what else. It's fine, I said, taking Do-hyun from her, pressing my hand to his forehead. Not dangerously so but warm enough. He leaned his head against my shoulder with the heavy-headed compliance of a sick child and looked up at me with dark eyes that were, in this lighting, in this building, almost unbearably familiar. Mama, he said. My head hurts. I know, baby. We're going home. Who is that? I turned around because his eyes had moved to something behind me and because a 3-year-old has no understanding of timing or mercy. Kwon Do-hyun was standing at the end of the corridor. He had followed me out. Of course he had. And now he was standing very still 10 meters away and he was looking at my son, at the dark eyes, at the jaw, at the particular way Do-hyun held his head when he was curious about something, which was a habit I had watched develop over 3 years and recognized as a thing that did not come from my side, and Do-hyun's face was doing something I had never seen it do in all the years I knew him. It was coming apart. Very slowly, very quietly, the way controlled things come apart when they encounter something they were not built to withstand. He took one step forward, then stopped. Like he needed permission from the laws of physics before he could trust what he was seeing. Jae-woo, he said. And my name in his mouth sounded nothing like Mr. Kwon or It's Better This Way or any of the careful professional distance of the last hour. It sounded the way it used to sound. Undone. Do-hyun turned his face into my neck. Then turned it back out again because he was 3 and curiosity always won. Mama, who is the tall man? The corridor was very quiet. I held my son and I looked at the man who had signed the papers and I felt 4 years of everything. The first night in Mapogu, the morning sickness, the Tuesday in March, the certification, the clients, the magazine, the studio, 7 employees, the charcoal blazer, every dinosaur question, every bedtime, every moment of building something real from a signature and a secret. I felt all of it standing behind me like something I had earned, like ground I was standing on that was finally, permanently mine. His name is Mr. Kwon, I said to Do-hyun, steady and clear. He is Iyama's client. Do-hyun closed his eyes. Opened them. He was still looking at my son the way a man looks at something that has answered a question he didn't know he was asking. How old, he said. Not quite a question. Like he already knew and needed to hear it anyway. 3, I said. The number landed in the corridor like something with weight. He did the math. I watched him do it. I watched it arrive on his face. Not accusation, not anger, not the cold control of a man who managed everything. Something raw. Something that looked, for the first time in 4 years, like a man who understood exactly what he had lost and was only now being permitted to see the full shape of it. I didn't know, he said. I know you didn't, I said. I made sure of that. Jae-woo. He has a fever, I said. I need to take him home. I know. He stopped. Started again. Will you let me? Mr. Kwon, I said, and my voice only did the smallest thing, just the smallest crack at the edge of it that I closed immediately. You signed the papers. I signed the papers. And then I built a life. A good one. And he is part of it, the best part. So before you ask me anything, before you say whatever you came to this corridor to say, you need to understand that whatever happens next, I am not the person who walked out of that apartment 4 years ago. And I will not be treated like her again. The corridor was silent. Do-hyun had fallen asleep on my shoulder, his small warm weight against my chest, his dark eyes closed, his breathing evening out into the deep reliable rhythm of a sick child finally resting. Do-hyun looked at him for a long time. Then he looked at me. And what was on his face was not the man at the window. It was not the controlled air, not the boardroom alpha, not the man who called leaving better. It was something I had not seen in 4 years and had spent a long time convincing myself I did not miss. You're right, he said quietly. You are not her. And I'm not him either. The pause. But if you will let me, I would like the chance to show you that. I looked at him. I looked at my sleeping son. I thought about the list I had made 2 days ago with your 3-year-old son has his eyes underlined twice at the top. I thought about the fact that Do-hyun had his father's eyes and was going to keep having them every day for the rest of his life. and that questions about the tall man were only going to become more complicated and more specific and more impossible to answer with he is Iyama's client. I thought about the person I had become, Park Jae-woo, the studio in Yongsan, the good blazer, the ground I was standing on, and I thought about what she would do. Not what the girl who signed the papers would do. What she would do. She would not run. She would not forgive easily either. But she would not run. My son's name, I said, is Park Do-hyun. He likes dinosaurs. He wakes up at 6 a.m. and he asks questions that are very difficult to answer, and he does not respond well to people who are not fully present. I held Do-hyun's gaze. If you are not prepared to be fully present, tell me now. Because he does not need someone who leaves. Something moved through Do-hyun's face. Something that settled. I left once, he said. I will not leave again. The corridor was quiet. Do-hyun breathed against my shoulder. Outside the building's soul moved on, enormous and indifferent and entirely unaware that something small and significant had just shifted in a corridor on the 14th floor. I adjusted my son's weight against my chest. He has a fever, I said. I'm going home. I know, Do-hyun said. Can I drive you? I looked at him for a long time. You can call your driver, I said. I'm not getting in a car with you alone yet. The corner of his mouth moved. Barely. Just barely. The ghost of something. That's fair, he said. And it was. It was entirely fair. And we both knew that fair was somewhere, not at the end, not at the beginning, but somewhere in the long complicated middle of whatever this was about to become.